my sister was my role model. She was 10 years older than me, and she was basically my everything. And just like my grandma that had passed away. So I kind of talked about my sister in my other videos. If you go back and watch those, I do a lot of story time. And I talked about my first marriage. He was an abuser. Second one, he was an alcoholic. My story on how I met my current boyfriend and how he was able to provide a way out away from these toxic people. And my sister was so beautiful. Like, she was always taller than me, skinnier than me. She had like this light brown, like gorgeous hair. My hair is like black, like jet black. And she had thinner hair, so her hair dried faster. It was just as long, and I was always, I guess, jealous of her. I guess I just wanted to be like her. And I would always kind of make fun of her and put her down. Like, I feel really bad saying that. I have this one video on my old tablet of her, and I'm like making fun of her, calling her names, and it was just really stupid. I don't know why I did that to her. I guess I was just so jealous and insecure of who I was. Like, I just wanted so bad to be like her, and I wasn't. And she was a very big part of my life. And so she had been married twice too. Her first husband ended up cheating on her, and they had a son together, which was a really big blessing. I wouldn't trade my nephews or nieces for our niece for anything. The second marriage didn't work out. Some problems happened. I won't really go into detail, but I got my niece and my nephew out of it, and like I said, they're just the greatest things ever. It was just so neat watching them grow up and seeing my sister in their through them, living through them still. And so her second divorce happened. She had gotten divorced, and she ended up going to the ex-husband's wedding. Like, it was immediately after they had gotten divorced, like within weeks, like 3 weeks later, he was married to another woman, and she had to go to that wedding and watch him because her daughter was in the wedding, so she was helping her daughter get ready. I remember it was a very traumatic day for her. Like, she was still in love with him, and it was just a big old mess. So at that time, her ex-husband had a very successful business around the area I'm from. Again, for privacy reasons, I won't tell you where I'm from. But basically, every billboard had his business on it, and he was just really booming. She kind of helped him start the business. She was like the bookkeeper and like the secretary, and she had a bunch of different titles. She was a legal notary, and she's a very smart woman. I didn't give her enough credit. Anything she put her mind to, she could do. And it's just she was a lot stronger than me. She still is. Like, she's done a lot of things when she was alive that I haven't been able to do, and I've lived almost 9 years longer than her now. So if you didn't get that, my sister's no longer with us, so I'm gonna preface it what happened. So like I said, the business, her ex-husband's business was booming. He was all over town, plastered everywhere. So I think at that time she needed a way out. So our brother, I have an older brother. He's 8 years older than me, 2 years younger than her. He lived in Tucson, and his wife at the time wanted to become a microbiologist, and so she went through all of this schooling at U of A. She went to school for like 12 years straight or something ridiculous like that. And so he had always been down in Tucson since like 2004, 2005. And for whatever reason, my sister decided, like, okay, I'm done with this town. I'm going to move with our brother, and I'm going down to Tucson. And so she just like up and left one day. She was, like I mentioned in my other video, she was a teller at a bank around town. And I think she got let go for being late too many times. So we're not very punctual people, and we're always running. Like, I don't know if anyone's heard of Navajo time. We're always running on Navajo time. We're always like a day late, dollar short. And so her job, she got let go. So she was kind of like, this is a good time for me to move. You know, I don't have a job anymore. I can look for work down in Tucson. I'm going. And so she just made that decision. And that was really big of her to do that by herself. So she had, like I mentioned, her firstborn, his dad wanted to take care of him. And so that was really good. So she didn't have her kids really. Her ex-husband got custody of the kids because he had the house, he had all the money, he had all the vehicles. She could have walked away and lived a very good life for a long time if she had gotten half in the divorce, but she basically didn't want nothing from him. She just walked away with her name. That was it. She was like Tina Turner, you know, all I want is my name. And so I was really brave and courageous of her. So she needed a ride, and the ex-husband had given her, I remember this really rundown old Ford Escort, and she didn't care. She was just like, as long as I have wheels, you know. She was like excited about it. It did smell. It had like a urine smell in it. It was gross, and just felt really bad for her. But she ended up, when she was working, she traded it in for a white Oldsmobile, and she was really happy, and so that's what she used to drive herself down to Tucson. And she moved in with my brother and his wife and their kids. And I don't know what happened down there. They didn't let me know. They still are very secretive and won't give me any information about what happened. I'm guessing it had to do a lot with drugs. That's just my guess. I'm not accusing them or anything. Like, if my family ever watches it, I'm not saying they were drug abusers, but I have a feeling or intuition that they might have been using drugs, selling drugs, peddling drugs. I don't know. So she moves down there about August of 2011, maybe. And so May of 2012, well, April, pretty much, our grandma took a turn for the worst. So my mom's mom, my maternal grandma, ended up passing away August 1st. So that's how I know her anniversary date, August 1st, 2012. And my grandma was hanging on that last week of her life. Like, she wanted to see her grandkids. She was holding on for somebody. I don't know who. I don't know if it was for my sister, because like 2 days later she passed away. And I think she was waiting for my brother. Like, my other cousins were very stubborn. They didn't go to see my grandma on her deathbed. And every day, like day in, day out, I was there. If I wasn't working, I was there. I was by my grandma's bedside. And I can do another video about that. But I've been hanging on to my sister for all of these years, and just her story and even her possessions, some things she left behind. And this has been really hard for me to talk about to anybody. And like I said, I'm sitting in her old room. It's filled with all these memories. I'm at home. I have time to think, and my mind's just racing. And like I mentioned in my other videos, like word vomit, I just have to get it out. I just have to get my story out there. This is the story of how I lost my sister. So our grandma passes away the week before. I'm begging my sister and brother, please come home. Grandma's not looking good. She doesn't look like she's gonna make it. You know, get here. I don't care how you guys get here. Get here. And my brother was really stubborn, like my other cousins. He didn't want to see her in that state. And they were like, oh, every time she's pulled through, you know, like she did have a heart attack that she pulled through. I think she had like pneumonia once she pulled through. It was like everything in the past. Yes, she pulled through. She was a very, very strong woman and very courageous. And she always prayed. She always prayed for all of us. And I think that's the only reason I am still here, is because of her prayers. That's how powerful her prayers were. And so my sister somehow gets gas money, and she comes home. She brings, I think it was just her at the time. And so this is when I was living with Joe. I was 30 minutes south of town. So I get up early that morning when I hear she's in town. And so she's staying at my mom and dad's house. So I get up an extra 20-30 minutes earlier so I can come and see her, because she has to go to the next biggest town over where my grandma was, and you know, wish her farewell, basically. And I just remember a bottle by her bedside, so I didn't really know she was still drinking. I guess she was, and she was laying on the bed, and I remember touching, like, petting her hair. She had this really soft hair, and I was like, Tori, wake up! I'm like, Grandma's waiting for you. And I was like, about in little tears. I was just happy to see my sister. I was happy she was going to see our grandma. Like I said, I don't know if my grandma was waiting for her to show up, because my grandma raised her and my brother when they were little. My mom had to work, my dad was at work, so my grandma basically raised my brother and my sister. And by the time I got born and old enough, my grandma had moved away, about an hour and a half away from our hometown. And so I can tell you another story about my grandma, but my sister, it was it was good seeing her. And I remember I don't know if it was that morning or the next morning, but she waited outside of my work. We had a meeting at a local restaurant in the morning. So I was a manager at a business in town, and we held a monthly meeting. And sometimes he would, treat us to breakfast at a restaurant in the morning. So he happened to treat us that morning, and I remember, I never will forget how she looked. She was, like I said, she had a white Oldsmobile, and she was leaning on it. And I was telling my boyfriend the story about how she would steal my clothes, and so I would be so furious at her. I remember I had these wind pants that I had in high school, like these expensive Adidas wind pants. Like, it had been like 4 or 5 years since I wore them, but they were still mine. And so she, for whatever reason, went in my room, took the wind pants, and she, like, pretty much wore them all the time. And when I started going to college, we had orientation, and I had a sweatshirt, a university sweatshirt, of New Mexico sweatshirt, and I had one at an orientation from one of my classes, and I had it just. I didn't really wear sweatshirts at the time. I still hardly wear sweatshirts, but I had it hanging in my closet, and I had never worn it. And she took it and she wore it every day. And so she was leaning against her Oldsmobile, like just waiting for me. She didn't have an attitude or anything. She was just very calm person, individual, and she was waiting for me to get out of my meeting. And I remember, like, the Adidas sweatpants she was wearing, or wind pants, and then it was a red University of New Mexico sweatshirt, and she had on her glasses that one of the optical shops I worked at, she had ordered them from, and they were rimless, and she had like one temple, and the other temple was gone. I can't remember which side. And she was basically, can you fix my glasses, do you think? We had a very talented optical person. And so I was like, hey man, do you, like, have any extra parts? My sister, broke her glasses, and she's missing one of her temples. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll take care of her. And he fixed it for her, very nice, didn't charge her. And so she was all happy. So I don't know if that's when she went to Albuquerque, or if that was the next day. It was over 8 years ago, so it's very hard to remember. So she goes to see my grandma, and like I said, 2 days later, my grandma was gone. It was a Sunday, or no, I had seen my grandma on a Sunday, and everybody, like, all of the family was there on my mom's side, pretty much, except for the cousins and my brother that didn't want to see her in that condition. And I stayed with her Saturday night, and I remember just crying. She loved the Bible, and I remember trying to read my grandma the Bible. I couldn't, like, make it through a verse. I was just bawling, because I knew she was gonna pass pretty soon, and it broke me, and I'm still broken from it. But anyway, so Sunday, all the family's there. Monday morning, about 3 o'clock, our grandma passes away, and they didn't want a funeral service for my grandma. I don't know whose idea it was, or if they thought it was her idea to do a celebratory service, just to celebrate her life, basically. So we held it at my auntie's house, and my auntie's son was one of the cousins that didn't want to see her at the hospital before she passed away. And I remember, like, walking past him and, like, kind of seeing him drink and so he was already drinking before I even got there. So I guess my sister had to pass him on the way in too, and for whatever reason, it broke her heart. Like, that was like her second mom and the woman that raised her, and it just broke my sister. It was just so sad to see. So I don't know if he stopped her or if she said, "Hey man, what's up? What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm drinking," and she's like, "Okay, I'm down. Let me drink with you," you know. And so she started drinking outside with our cousin, and so by the time we realized my sister was outside, she was very intoxicated. So I don't know how much they drank. I don't know how long she had been there with our cousin drinking. It was just, she was so broken and devastated, and she didn't know any other way to cope. And so I'm not blaming her. I'm not saying, she was an alcoholic or anything, or I've touched on this in the other videos. My ex-husband was native too, and I'm not saying all natives are alcoholics. I did have a drinking problem in myself, so I'm trying to stay sober. But if you drink, I'm not criticizing you or putting you down in any way. I'm just telling my story, how I saw it. So she's pretty gone at this point, and she's like, no, I don't want to go in. Like, she's kind of crying, and she can't even make it through my auntie's door. And the son was the same way. Even though he lived there, he couldn't walk through the door. It was weird. So she goes back down to Tucson. For whatever reason, I remember a specific trip of my parents having to go get her, or for whatever reason, they went down to Tucson, and my sister was driving them back to New Mexico, and they had mentioned that she was pretty intoxicated at that time. Like I said, I was with the first husband, the abuser, and I was living with him, so a lot of the things that went on I wasn't in the loop about. And my sister had a phone on my plan, so I had Verizon for as long as I can remember, and I was paying like the whatever $10 extra a month for her phone line. So she would lend her phone out, I found out, to very sketchy people, and these people would always do 411, and they would like do all of these charges and internet charges, and the bill started to get up there. So I warned her, like, hey, can you like stop doing this? Like, the bill's going up. I was the only one paying for the phone bill. I had like 4 phones under my plan or something like that at the time, and so I'm like, the phone bill's going up. Can you stop using the 411? And I kind of warned her, if it goes up again next month, I'm gonna have to turn your phone off. And she's like, okay, I'll stop, and she really tried. So like I said, I don't know who she was hanging out with. I don't know who was using her phone or who she lent it out to. So the next month rolled around, and same thing, the charges were up there, and so I told her, I'm sorry, I have to turn your phone off. And so that's one of my biggest regrets. Like, she didn't have a phone down there, and it was only, I don't know how much a month, but with the charges, but for whatever reason, I was like full-time student, full-time work. Like, I didn't have a lot of money. I had worked at that business for 5 years. I barely got maybe a $2 raise in that time period. So I wasn't making a lot of money. I had a lot of bills. Had like vehicle payment, credit cards, the phone bill. Just, I couldn't afford it. So I told her, I'm sorry, I have to turn your phone off. And she was like, okay. Like, she was very non-confrontational. I don't remember her talking bad about anybody in her life. Like, she took a lot from everybody. Like, everybody gave her crap, and she just took it, and she did it happily with a smile on her face. And her faith in God, it was just miraculous. Because I mentioned, and I touched in my other videos, that we are Pentecostal. So my grandma was Pentecostal, my mom was baptized Pentecostal as well, my sister was, and me. And so this is, I'm not saying, I'm kind of like a 3rd generation Pentecostal, basically, so I guess, since my grandma was, but we all kind of came to God and found God at the same time, and my sister was a big part of that. And I remember her prayers, and if you're Pentecostal too, about the speaking in tongues, and her tongues was like like heavenly, and it was so strong and so powerful. Like her prayers, like I said, my grandma was a prayer warrior. I'm pretty sure on both sides, my mom and my dad's side. My mom's a prayer warrior. I'm starting to become a prayer warrior myself. I know I don't pray as much as I should. I don't watch church as much as I should due to the pandemic. I can't go to church. There is another apostolic church in town. And I don't want to badmouth them either, but a lot of shady things went down with that church, and I choose not to go there. I kind of wanted to while I was home, but because I have all of my church clothes at my mom and dad's house, and I don't think I'm strong enough to face all of those people or all of those individuals. So there's that. But she took a lot from a lot of people, like I said, and she wasn't the first to cast a stone at anybody. Like, everybody wanted to cast their stones on her, and I'm not saying she's a martyr. So I don't know what happened after I shut her phone off. Every once in a while, if she got somebody else's phone, she would like call my mom and dad and say, hey, I'm okay, and like every few weeks she'd call them and let them know she was okay. And this went on for a few months, I think. And right around September of 2012, one of my aunties on my dad's side came into where I worked. My boss was very stern, and he didn't allow any visitors. So like, if you had a family member in there, it better be because somebody's dying, basically. And so I was like, like, I don't want my boss to come out and yell at my auntie. And so I like rushed up to her like, hi auntie, can I help you? And just out of nowhere, I don't know what gave her this intuition or what gave her this thought, but she was like, hey, when's the last time you heard from Tori? So Tori was my sister's name, her nickname. I'm like, whew, trying to think about it. I'm like, oh, it's been a while. I'm not entirely sure, auntie. And I don't know what gave her, I don't know if God was telling her what, I think she's missing, and I think you guys should look for her. And she just told me that information and like just kind of walked out. And I'm like, okay. And so like, I go home, or I go to tell my mom and dad, and I'm like, hey, auntie so and so came in and she thinks Tori's missing, like, should we go look for her? And we don't remember the last time. My mom knows the dates of when she last talked to my sister. It had to have been September 6th of 2020. And so I don't know if my auntie came in like the end of September, beginning of October, but it was about a month after that. And my mom had mentioned that she talked to my sister on the phone. My sister wanted to come home because we had been begging. It had been almost a year since she's been down there, and we were begging her to come home. Please come home, please. Like, and she's like, no, I'm fine. She had found a boyfriend down there, and later on I found she was going back and forth from my brother's house to the boyfriend's house. Boyfriend kicked her out. She'd go back to my brother's house. That year, my brother ended up going into prison. It was his third strike, his final strike, and so grandma passed away, brother went to prison in May, and then Tori went missing in September. And so I learned when she got kicked out of the boyfriend's house, she'd go back to my brother's house where the wife was. The brother, our sister-in-law, who's supposed to be there for us, kicked her out, and she'd go back to the boyfriend's house. And it was just like a vicious cycle. I don't know how long this had been going on. So we don't know what to do, so we call my brother's wife and say, hey, when's the last time you seen Tori? When's the last time you've heard from Tori? And she's like, oh, she's been missing for a month. Like, she didn't care. So that was really hard. So we're like, are you gonna call it into the authorities, And she was like, oh, the sheriff's office is on the other side of town. It's like a whole bus ride, a whole day's bus ride. I don't have time for that. I have to pick up my kids. And she just had this really bad attitude on the phone. She's always had a bad attitude. And we're like, okay, so we need to go down and look for her, you know. And so I took time off of work, like, hey, I need to go look for my sister. I'm pretty sure she's missing. We have to report she's missing. And apparently, this lady knew about it. Let's call her Sun. So Sun knew my sister was missing. She didn't care. It wasn't her problem. She didn't have a vehicle. I think she had got fired from her microbiologist job. She had been unemployed. My sister was getting food stamps at the time, and I remember vividly my mom telling me, like, as soon as we got there and we went to the sheriff's office. That was our first stop. And this day bus ride, Sun had claimed that would take her all day to get to the sheriff's office. She was there within like 30 minutes, and because she called us, and she was very nosy at that point in time, like, where are you guys? She kept calling, where are you guys? Where are you guys? Where are you guys? And we're like, we're at the sheriff's office picking up Tori's possessions. And she was like, oh, okay, I'll be there, I'll meet you guys there. And she was like there instantly. And like, why couldn't you have filed this missing persons report for us? She didn't care. For whatever reason, she didn't care. And so we pick up my sister's possessions. She was never a name brand girl, like anything with a label on it she didn't care about. She could care less. So when they brought out this Coach backpack, like this little mini Coach backpack back when they were like really popular, I was like, I don't think that's hers. So I don't know who gave her this backpack or how she got it. And then they brought out this like non-name brand purse, like a Walmart purse or whatever. I'm like, that's her purse, you know, that's hers. So I don't know whose Coach backpack this was that the authorities gave us. But my mom said one of the first questions Son asked was, where's her EBT card? And that's all she wanted was my sister's food stamp card. So I thought that was really suspicious. And so we rented a hotel that night. It was very sketchy, very bad area. My dad doesn't really like to drive around big cities, so since he was the driver, we just rented this kind of rundown hotel down the street. Like we didn't have a lot of money, like I said. So we stayed there. I don't even remember if it was like a Motel 8 or something, maybe. And the sister-in-law took off, Son took off when she found out we didn't have her EBT card in the purse or whatever. And I think we gave her a ride somewhere. Like I said, she didn't have a ride, and gave her and her sons a ride. And